The first thing I saw when I pushed open my apartment door was a stack of handwritten love letters lying neatly in the center of my bed, tied together with a faded blue ribbon. My suitcase slipped from my hand and crashed onto the floor, but I barely heard it. I had come home 17 days earlier than anyone expected after my construction project was cancelled without warning. I had imagined surprising my roommate with lunch, catching up on everything I had missed, and enjoying the comfort of home again. Instead, I stood frozen, staring at words written in elegant handwriting across the top envelope. The first line stole every breath from my lungs. It read that if fate ever separated them, those letters would always find their way back to the only person who had ever truly felt like home. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue sharing emotional journeys that remind us of the good still left in this world. Rowan Mercer had never considered himself an emotional man. At 31, he believed life rewarded discipline more than feelings. He worked hard, kept promises, and rarely expected miracles. His roommate, Declan Foster, was almost his opposite. Declan filled every room with laughter, remembered birthdays, rescued injured birds from sidewalks, and somehow convinced strangers to smile before they walked away. They had shared the apartment for nearly 4 years after meeting through a mutual friend, and their friendship had become something closer to family. Rowan trusted him enough to leave a spare key, share bills without counting every dollar, and know that someone would always water the plants before they wilted. That trust was why seeing the letters on his own bed felt less like discovering paper and more like discovering a crack running through the foundation of his entire life. The apartment looked unusually clean, with fresh flowers sitting near the kitchen window. Sunlight poured through the curtains, making everything appear warm and peaceful, but Rowan felt only confusion. He carefully untied the ribbon and noticed every envelope had been opened before. The handwriting belonged to someone named Clara Whitmore, a name he had never heard Declan mention. The letters were filled with memories stretching back nearly a decade. They spoke about shared dreams, missed opportunities, fear, forgiveness, and a love that refused to disappear despite years of silence. Yet one detail refused to leave Rowan's mind. Every envelope carried his apartment address. His heartbeat quickened as questions crowded his thoughts. Why had someone else's love letters been delivered to his home? Why had they been placed so carefully on his bed? Why had Declan never explained any of this? Rowan spent the afternoon reading every page. Instead of scandal or betrayal, he found something heartbreakingly human. Clara wrote about believing she had lost the courage to tell the truth. She admitted making decisions based on fear instead of love. She described walking away from the person she loved because she thought she was protecting him from her own uncertain future. Each letter ended with hope that one day honesty would arrive before it was too late. By late afternoon, the front door opened, and Declan stepped inside carrying grocery bags. His cheerful expression disappeared the instant he saw Rowan standing beside the bed with the ribbon in his hands. The silence between them stretched longer than either of them expected. Rowan had prepared himself for anger, excuses, or lies. Instead, he saw exhaustion. Declan looked like someone who had carried a heavy secret for far too long. Without needing dramatic explanations, the truth slowly unfolded throughout the afternoon. The apartment had once belonged to Declan's older cousin before Rowan moved in. Clara had continued mailing letters there long after everyone believed the relationship had ended forever. Declan had tried several times to locate his cousin, but the man had disappeared overseas after a family tragedy and never left reliable contact information. The letters continued arriving every few months. Declan read enough of the first one to realize they contained deeply personal emotions and decided they deserved to stay untouched until their rightful owner could receive them. When Rowan left for work 17 days earlier, another letter arrived. Declan gathered every previous envelope together so he could finally visit his cousin's elderly mother that weekend, hoping she might know where to send them. He had placed them temporarily on Rowan's bed simply because the bedroom shelf was being repaired that morning. The explanation answered every practical question, yet Rowan still struggled with something deeper. For a few painful hours, he had allowed suspicion to replace years of trust. He had imagined betrayals that never existed. Looking back at the letters, he realized they had become mirrors reflecting his own fears rather than Declan's actions. That realization stayed with him during the following days. He noticed how quickly people built stories around incomplete information. A delayed phone call became rejection. A misunderstood gesture became betrayal. An unanswered message became evidence that someone no longer cared. Rowan wondered how many relationships quietly collapsed beneath assumptions instead of conversations. Several days later, Declan finally located his cousin through an old co-worker. The man, named Graham Ellis, agreed to meet them in a quiet public garden during a bright Saturday afternoon. Rowan almost declined the invitation, believing the meeting belonged only to Declan and Graham, but Declan insisted he come. He said some endings deserved witnesses because they reminded everyone why honesty mattered. Graham arrived carrying the weight of many difficult years across his face. His hair had grayed far earlier than expected, and deep lines framed eyes that had clearly spent too much time searching backward instead of forward. When Declan handed him the bundle of letters, Graham did not open them immediately. He simply rested both hands on the ribbon as though touching something sacred. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers while families laughed in the distance. Everything around them continued normally, completely unaware that one person's past had just returned wrapped in blue ribbon. As Graham slowly read the letters beneath the warm afternoon sun, tears quietly escaped despite every attempt to hide them. Rowan watched an ordinary man rediscover years of words he believed had never existed. Each page carried apologies that had never reached him. Every confession arrived years too late, yet somehow not too late to matter. Graham admitted he had spent almost 10 years believing Clara had stopped loving him without explanation. The silence had convinced him he was easy to leave behind. He built an entirely different life around that belief, never realizing she had written again and again, hoping someone would eventually place those letters in his hands. Life had not stood still for either of them. Clara had remained unmarried, dedicating herself to caring for her aging father until his passing. Graham had devoted himself to humanitarian engineering projects across Europe, avoiding emotional attachments because he never fully healed from losing her. Neither had found the happiness they once imagined. Yet the letters reminded them that sometimes the greatest tragedy is not losing love but losing the truth. Weeks later, under another brilliant afternoon sky, Clara agreed to meet Graham in the same garden where he had finished reading the letters. Rowan and Declan sat far enough away to respect their privacy while quietly witnessing something extraordinary. There were no dramatic movie moments, no rushed embraces, and no perfect speeches. Instead, there were two ordinary people choosing honesty after years of regret. They walked together for hours beneath golden sunlight, speaking slowly, listening carefully, and giving each other something they had been denied for nearly a decade: understanding. Not every broken relationship returns to romance, but every honest conversation has the power to return dignity. Whether Clara and Graham would rebuild a future together no longer seemed like the most important question. The true miracle was that neither of them would spend the rest of life wondering what might have happened if the truth had finally been heard. Watching them changed Rowan in unexpected ways. He stopped assuming silence always meant rejection. He became quicker to ask questions before forming conclusions. He apologized more easily when pride tempted him to remain stubborn. Most importantly, he thanked Declan for protecting those letters instead of treating them as forgotten mail. A lesser person might have thrown them away without a second thought. Declan had quietly preserved someone else's hope for years, expecting no recognition. Months passed, and the apartment felt warmer than ever. The friendship between Rowan and Declan grew stronger because it had survived suspicion instead of pretending it never happened. Trust was no longer something they simply possessed. It became something they intentionally protected through honesty and patience. One bright afternoon, another envelope arrived at the apartment. This time it carried both Graham's and Clara's names. Inside was a simple photograph of them standing beside a lakeside walking path, smiling with peaceful eyes that no longer carried unfinished questions. On the back they had written that sometimes the longest journey is not measured in miles but in the courage to finally tell the truth. They thanked Declan for safeguarding their past and Rowan for reminding them that compassion often reaches people through unexpected strangers. Rowan placed the photograph into a small frame near the living room window where afternoon sunlight illuminated it every day. Visitors occasionally asked who the smiling couple were, and Rowan always answered that they were proof that hope sometimes arrives wrapped in ordinary envelopes instead of grand miracles. Before this story comes to its close, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment telling us whether you believe forgiveness becomes easier when the full truth is finally revealed, or whether some wounds remain too deep even after honesty arrives. As Rowan looked around the apartment that had once filled him with fear, he no longer remembered the shock of finding mysterious letters on his bed. He remembered the lesson they carried instead. Trust is fragile, assumptions are dangerous, and kindness often works quietly without applause. A simple decision to protect forgotten letters had reunited broken hearts, restored lifelong friendships, and reminded several people that hope rarely disappears completely. Sometimes it simply waits for the right person to open the envelope. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. May this story remind all of us that patience, compassion, and forgiveness can transform even the most unexpected moments into the beginning of something beautiful.